So the left is very aggressive in a conceptual way. They are really interested in subverting our language and the concepts that we use when we try to communicate. And especially, this creates a trap for conservatives and those who are not part of the woke movement. Now, very frequently, when we look people who belong to the woke side, we see people who are not engaging in debates. They are shouting. They constantly try to victimize themselves. That's not a proper conduct for, a meaningful debate. And there is a tendency that conservatives and classical liberals alike have to try to argue against these people, engage in a rational debate with them on terms that they set. And I think that this is a trap, because when we give the conceptual tool to the other side, or we recognize that the other side puts forward the concepts and they give the meaning to the concepts that we use, and we want to win them in their own game, we are not going to see the fact that they are not addressing us. They seem to be addressing conservatives and classical liberals, but in fact they are addressing the undecided voters, the voters who are really going to sway the vote in one or another direction in the next and every other general election. Now, before we say more about this, visit the website, lotuseaters.com, where for only £5 a month you can have access to our premium content, such as this discussion on George Orwell's Animal Farm, where Connor and Bo talk about George Orwell's short masterpiece.
Yeah, it's the shortest book we've ever done for a book club, but we discussed so much of it, we ended up spontaneously making it into two parts. And one of the core focuses of this is obviously the manipulation of language, because they try to rationally construct an animal-only commune with the 7 commandments and the axiom that all animals are equal, and then it eventually over time moves because those at the top seek power and they bend the ideological precepts to what they want to do. So all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
Exactly. And this is an interesting use of the notion of equality, because it's unqualified. We're not told whether we are talking about equality of outcome, equality of opportunity, equality of rights before the law that classical liberals were about. It's just a term that has been used out because it seems as if those who are undecided, those who form let's say, a sizable part of the population, they're interested in that notion, and they think that the person who uses it has a sort of moral advantage. Now, let's dig a bit deeper into it. Our not-so-favorite, Owen Jones, published an article in Guardian this Monday. The title is "The Tories Have Revealed Their Battle Plan for a New Kind of Class War." Subtitle: "The promotion of Lee Anderson reveals a lot about who is and who isn't considered working class in Britain." Now, two things just about the title and the subtitle. We have, again, an emphasis on something new. We constantly live in unprecedented circumstances, according to the woke left, and this implies that we constantly need to conceptualize them, and we go to them to conceptualize it for us. So we have a new kind of class war. The notion of a class war is really Marxist. It has Marxist connotations. So he is trying to supplant a Marxist framework through which to understand current events. And just about the subtitle, it's magnificent. What the hell does the promotion of any person has to do with who is and who isn't considered working class in Britain?
Well, so Lee actually grew up from a working class household and he was a single dad for quite a while, but he's saying inconvenient things like not everyone needs a food bank and maybe you should be better at budgeting and take some personal responsibility. And that's really inconvenient for the Marxist narrative that wants to blame all inequality on a capitalist superstructure.
I read also that his father was a coal miner and he was a coal miner himself. So, I mean, it seems he has worked more than Owen Jones.
Yeah, just a tad than the priestly class who have done nothing but whine.
Okay, so I read from Owen Jones's text. "Boris Johnson's Brexit has been a dismal failure, heralding only falling investment and stagnant growth. If you want an admission of this truth, look no further than Saturday's revelation of a secretive 2-day cross-party summit of Remainers and Leavers that took place last week in a Grand Oxfordshire retreat to address this national fiasco. But let's not forget who the victims are here. As in all crises, it is the working class who suffer the most from our politicians' malice. The same people Tory Brexiteers deceitfully claim to champion but know nothing about. I suspect Owen Jones knows everything about the working class.
Yeah, well, not just that. It's the Brexiteers. Brexit was not the problem. The lockdown that you supported, the mass money printing that you supported, because it's the backdoor mechanism by which we can have a universal basic income, is the problem. Because the inflation-based monetary system is definitely not free marketeer. It's not the individual sovereignty idea that Brexit was founded upon. It's explicitly socialist. So I'd quite let's get out under the boot heel of that. But no, you'd rather take the reins and tyrannize me instead.
That's cherry picking, and the issue is, and that is what I want to put forward, is that Owen Jones is basically addressing the undecided. He's not addressing conservatives and classical liberals with this piece. And he is presenting a version of the story, a particular interpretation that includes some factors and singles out other factors in order for that to take sway of the public mind, capture public imagination.
It's a linguistic war of attrition for the peanut gallery versus lots of conservatives are busy trying to refute their terms because we're engaging, we think interpersonally, we're engaging in good faith. They just want to own us and then colonize the minds of the undecided.
I continue. Indeed, in his younger years, our current Prime Minister was honest about the gilded circles he inhabited. I have friends who are aristocrats. I have friends who are upper class, said the youthful Rishi Sunak in a BBC documentary recorded in 2001. I have friends who are working class. Well, not working class. He spluttered it out as though the very notion was absurd. In an unequal society, profoundly segregated by class, privileged people see the lives of most of the population as exotic and alien. Stereotypes emerge, after all, because supposed fellow citizens inhabit different worlds. This brings us to the recent appointment of Tory MP Lee Anderson as the party's vice chair. Anderson has made his name by making crude and provocative public interventions, such as saying he would boycott watching the England football team because of the anti-racist gesture taken by its players, or supporting the return of the death penalty. In recent years, media outlets and politicians have treated the likes of Anderson as emblematic of working-class voters, a category they often see as, to be blunt, a white man in his 50s or 60s with a Midlands accent and reactionary opinions. Rishi Sunak, who enjoys a family fortune twice that of the king, presumably believes that Anderson represents a direct hotline to working-class England. But the new Tory vice chair also serves another function, to portray opponents of right-wing dogma as out-of-touch metropolitan elitists. So it seems to me that this is a strawman argument.
Did you expect better from Owen Jones?
No. And he is basically putting forward the idea that, well, conservatives don't know working-class people. They think that Lee Anderson is a representative of the working class people, and they put him in order to, which he isn't according to Jones, and they put him in order to appeal to working class people.
A bunch of working class Brexiteers were following Owen Jones down the street quite a while ago, and he decided to film himself and call them gammons. Owen Jones have nothing but reactive contempt for the working class. He wants to be the vanguard that rules over them.
I think this is a persistent theme in the left, that they are trying to portray themselves as being the only one who care for the wider population. And okay, yes, there are people like Rishi Sunak who I don't know of his upbringing, and frankly, I don't care.
He's a rich globalist.
Yeah, I don't care much about his personal relationships, but there are also champagne socialists. There is such a thing.
There are also cocaine conservatives. I won't name any for legal reasons.
Right-wingers masquerading as tribunes of the people are nothing new. But as it is revealed that Tory ministers are splashing public cash on luxury hotels, chauffeur and travel, it looks increasingly beyond parody.
Wait, that luxury cash, hotels and travel is for the migrants, right? The migrants that Owen Jones supports all of my salary going on. That's what he means, not themselves, right? Or is it Angela Rayner having the £200 personalised AirPods? Or is that okay because she's working class and kind of brash and on the Labour front benches and ugly as hell?
I think in his mind the ends the ends justify the means.
Right, okay, so we're not working with any consistency here whatsoever. Thank
Yeah.
you for establishing that.
Okay, there has been in recent times a deliberate attempt to muddy public understanding of what social class means. For instance, it's notable that commentators often seem to consider Anderson as some kind of authentic voice of ordinary people, but not, say, the RMT's Mick Lynch, another white man of a similar age. Why? Because Lynch has a subversive conception of class, whereby those without wealth or power can pursue their interests through collective action. Anderson's status, on the other hand, is the product of a redefinition of class, on cultural rather than economic lines. For the new right, to be working class doesn't mean having nothing but your labor to sell, but being opposed to ruthless urban progressives who favor immigration, multiculturalism, and wokery.
Yes, it's a fundamental, it's like I know you, Carl, were talking about Oakeshott. It's a fundamental understanding that you cannot receive wisdom from an ideology and map it onto the world. It's about having enough life experience and then speak from a place of practical experience. And all of these metropolitan elitists might have grown up poor, but if they've been hand-picked for their ESG-compliant personality traits, like Owen Jones has, dropped into a university and churned out as an ideological acolyte, you can't claim to be working class. Instead, if you are substantively representing the working class by trying to give them a leg up and also being a patriot, like Lee Anderson, you're going to be far more an accurate representative of working class interests than Mick Lynch, who means that because of his communist dogma, they can't get to work because the trains aren't running.
And I want to say that this is an interesting thing because they're trying to, if anyone is engaged in conceptual engineering here, it's
Yes.
the left,
Yeah,
traditionally. And so what they're doing is that they're trying to give a completely new redefinition of class, and they're blaming the other side for it. It's again projection. That is why they constantly put the anti in front of everything.
Yes.
It's anti-imperialism, anti-violence, anti-whatever. So this is actually where they're trying to, again, conservatives know this, but they're not appealing to conservatives. They are appealing to the undecided. And they say it is the conservatives that are trying to create linguistic chaos. And I really don't understand why this should be an issue, because it seems to me that this just projects the ideology of Owen Jones. He wants to fit this Marxist paradigm into anything he talks about. And he says, well, these people are trying to conceive of the working class in different lines, and they're having a cultural input in their definition of the working class. And this is something bad because it disagrees with a Marxist narrative.
Well, it makes your narrative far harder to inflict on the people you'd most like to control, raise consciousness in, and lead a revolution using, which appoints you the master of them.
And he says, the result is that younger generations have been effectively excluded from the category of working class. So it's not the working class. He said two sentences ago that they are introducing a new concept, one of which is cultural and not economic. And now he's switching into the economic. It's complete confusion.
Yeah, sleight of hand.
This is even though they have a very good claim to it. After all, many are in low-paid and insecure jobs.
Because of immigration.
They own precious little capital.
Because of immigration.
Home ownership has collapsed among younger adults.
Because of immigration.
And have been at the sharp end of austerity.
What austerity? All the budgets keep endlessly going up to meet the demand placed on it by immigration.
And here is where he's trying to say something that I think we should challenge.
Yep.
It says, at the same time, they are more socially progressive than any previous generation, from immigration to LGBTQ rights, and far more likely than their grandparents to have grown up with migrants, people of color, or gay or transgender children. It is notable that most of those judged to be working class by pollsters and then aged under 35 voted for Remain in 2016. Yet they are rarely portrayed in Britain as members of the working class. Why? A right-wing media ecosystem has much to do with it. Many newspapers barely conceal their contempt for younger people, denouncing them as entitled snowflakes.
Which newspapers? Like the Telegraph? Maybe. Definitely not the Times. The Times is milquetoast, middle class, midwittery. Daily Mail on occasion, but it's incredibly schizophrenic and it has literal pornography down the sidebar. So which of those is socially conservative? Seriously. The Telegraph, maybe. Us, sure.
The message here, though, is that Owen Jones tries to put forward is that the younger people right now are irrevocably woke.
Yeah.
That is the message he's trying to put forward. And I must say, I don't agree with this. And I think that this should be challenged. Maybe we do have tendencies to embrace woke ideology more than before, but I think that that should definitely be challenged,
The
because
generation isn't lost.
unless we do this, we will become fatalists.
Yes.
And I think that fatalism is not the best way forward. And we can have amazingly bright people who have really interesting and wise things to say. For instance, like Peter Hitchens, who occasionally do display a kind of fatalism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And that wins half the battle for them. If they're trying to use nihilism as a praxeological tool to then make you so depressed that you adopt their ideology and just submit, then if you do say, oh, we give up, it's over, then you're letting them win. Like, their propaganda would not be necessary if they were winning.
So I think, everyone can finish the article
In their own time, so you don't get an aneurysm. Yeah.
I want to say, though, that there is an interesting thing that we should remember. Politics is a comparative science. It's not enough to just say that the opposition or the position of the other side is problematic. You have to at least bring forward an alternative that is at least less problematic. Just by saying that, the other side is not perfect does not mean that you have something to offer. So I was trying to think, what does Owen Jones has to offer? I mean, that's no secret. If we look at his webpage, it just says first word is socialist. Okay,
Yeah.
So he is putting forward socialism, but his notion of socialism is really interesting because it's, as we will see, it's not a worked out understanding of. It's not. He does not have something to offer, and we should see here. The Labour press had this tweet, and they say, which minister's department spent almost £60,000 buying stationery at Banner from 22nd of February to the 2nd April of 2021, despite only spending about £1,500 at the same company for the other 325 days of the year. I would say that it's refreshing sometimes to see people from the left, the Labour Party, talk about government spending as being sometimes too high.
Yeah.
And Owen Jones has to ruin the day. He comes back and says, I think Labour should spend more time fleshing out a positive vision for the country rather than launching really boring attacks on bulk buying stationery. Now, there are many things we can say here that, first of all, details are beneath him. He's not interested in having a layout plan. And also, he has no alternative personally to offer. That is why he constantly talks about, he outsources the task of devising an alternative.
He does what Marx urged, which is the unrelenting criticism of all that exists.
So the thing is that if he has no formulated alternative, why is he so vocal? I think it has to be with being prominent and selling books. And
Yeah, he just wants money, and then, it just so happens that if my revolution that I prescribe comes to pass, I get to be at the top of the tower.
But that is not serious in terms of politics because, as we said, politics is a comparative discipline, at least in its theoretical aspect. And if there is nothing to be offered as an alternative, well, you're not actually saying anything. So I want to say, though, that this shows another theme. It shows the deceitfulness of woke propaganda, that we shouldn't fall into their trap. There are actually two audiences that people like Owen Jones appeal to. It is the wokery, the woke audiences, and the undecided voters. So the thing is that if we try to win them in their own game, at their own terms, without focusing on the concepts that we are using, we are going to be led down a trap. And this trap is going to be that we are going to be portrayed into the undecided voters as in terms that are traditionally not the ones that we would accept. So I want to say that there are three functions of virtue signaling. That first, but when woke people virtue signal, they are sustaining the belief about the woke, among the woke, that they do possess moral superiority. This is a way they bring together parts of the voting population that are, let's say, really woke, and this is how they keep that alive. But second, it force feeds a message to the undecided, those who are not going to participate to the debate, but they are going to, let's say, occasionally observe it. So I want to say that this lures conservatives to accept a mistaken way in which to portray the debate. And I want to say that traditionally, the left had a problem with notions such as reason, liberalism, democracy, community, autonomy, and care for the people. And especially in the last 3 decades, after, let's say, the Cold War, we had, let's say, the sort of victory, even if it was a momentary victory, of liberal parliamentary democracies. And this is where this is where the left lost. But the point is that the undecided in such political regimes, they do have a bias towards the ideals of liberty and constitutional democracy.
Yeah, the end of history. Yeah.
The left hates the Constitution. We know that they just can't hide it. But that is why they try to subvert our understanding of the notion of liberalism and the notion of democracy and the notion of talking, as well as notions such as the community, autonomy, and also care for the people. So I want to say that when they are trying to, where they seem to address conservatives and classical liberals, they're actually addressing the undecided. When the conservatives and classical liberals are trying to respond to the woke on woke terms, instead of challenging those notions, we're actually falling into their trap. And we are appearing to the undecided as having no ideals. And they also gain the momentum that these ideals have in the societies we live in the last 3 decades. I think that wraps it up well. So last article, it's one by Keir Starmer. I don't think we should look at much of it. He says, "My Labour Party is patriotic, a party of equality, not protest." And let us read the last 2 paragraphs. He says, "The changes we have made aren't just fiddling around the edges or temporary fixes. They are permanent, fundamental, irrevocable. The Labour Party I lead today is unrecognizable from 2019. There are those who don't like that change, who still refuse to see the reality of what had gone on under the previous leadership. To them I say in all candor, we're never going back. If you don't like it, nobody is forcing you to stay. But to those who are reassured by what we have done, who think we are going in the right direction, who want to see more, I say, I share your hunger. We need you. Let's keep changing Labour. Then let's change the country."
See, so I was about to say, it's actually useful political messaging there to gatekeep very strongly about your personal ideals. But there's 2 problems. Number 1, the ideals are acid to English traditionalism because socialism is a foreign German import which does not respect every man as king in his own castle. And then the other thing is, if you're trying to say you're patriotic, fundamentally revolutionary change of the country, which is required to strip back Blairism, but to revolutionarily change something is not to respect its traditions. And if you're going to parrot Blairite talking points, nobody's going to believe you that you are the effective administrative antidote to all of the Blairism that's come before. Unfortunately, plenty of people are because they're just swapping to Labour, but anyone who's plugged in knows that you're just lying.
And I want to say that this shows a final step of aggressive conceptual strategy because Keir Starmer is addressing the undecided voters. Those who are leftists are going to vote for him. And he continues, "The Labour Party I lead is patriotic. It is a party of public service, not protest. It is a party of equality, justice, and fairness. One that proudly puts the needs of working people above any fringe interest."
All 3 of those concepts are antithetical.
But that is my point, that he is throwing away concepts without qualifying it. And this shows that actually he understands that the undecided voters, who are a sizable population, they are in favor of, for instance, patriotism.
Yes.
And by heading along these lines, he's trying to subvert the concept. Maybe he's not doing consciously.
He's absolutely doing it consciously.
I try to be sometimes,
He ran a Marxist newspaper that wanted to abolish the monarchy in university.
Maybe you're right. Maybe maybe I'm
comic.
being too diplomatic here. But okay, but that is the issue. They're trying to throw away notions like that, and unless we try to have a conceptual answer to conceptual threats, we are going to be led into the trap of fighting in a game whose rules are not set by us.
Yeah, we'll be tilting at windmills.
Yes. That is why I think that those who are on the conservative and the classical liberal side, we have work to do in a sense, and we have conceptual work to do as well. And we need to counter these tendencies.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Brokenomics series, the most recent episode on rounding up on questions that were asked. If you'd like to find out what else the Lotus Eaters are putting out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.